Hello, and welcome to week 8. And book 8 is Greek Lessons by Han Kang. Han Kang won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2024 this year. And her most famous book, The Vegetarian, I looked at just before I started this series. And this is the book that follows The Vegetarian. And then she's got one more book that I have, which I will look at in a couple of weeks. So this is Greek Lessons, and it's translated by Deborah Smith and Emily Yewan. Okay, so what is this book about? Well, it's about Greek lessons. It's about a woman who is attending these adult learning kind of classes, I guess. I think it's like adult learning type classes. It's a night class at a university somewhere in Seoul, Korea. She's Korean. The teacher is Korean. Apparently, the course is taught in a combination of Korean for the explanations and in Greek. And her teacher is a man who is Korean and had gone to Germany for a while and has come back and has been back in Korea for, I think, about a decade. But what is interesting about these two characters and what is at the core is that the main character, and looking to see, I don't remember her name if it's even given. The main character loses the ability to speak. It's happened to her a couple of times in her life, and at the time of these Greek lessons, she's completely lost the ability to speak. And because of this, she has lost custody of her son. She's had difficulties with various other occupations in her life and things in her life. And the speaker, the teacher, he is losing his ability to see. And he wears very thick glasses and can barely see at all. And somehow or another, these two characters who have a perception, a difficulty in sensing and perceiving the world the way most of us do, somehow or other manage to find some kind of connection. Possibly love, hard to say precisely what it is, but they find some kind of a connection. Which is interesting because she can't speak. So she has to write things for people. Well, he can't see, so he can't read what she writes. So she ends up using some version, I suppose, of sign language, I think a Korean version, or she just traces the Korean letters, the Korean characters into his hand. And that's how she's able to communicate with him. Now, she can hear perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with her hearing, so she can hear him. Okay, so why is she taking this Greek course? Well, she's taking this Greek course because she thinks that this is going to help her revive her ability to speak. Because her ability to speak is not based on any known physical problem. It's not based on any physiological thing going on in her brain. It's not based on any sort of known psychological condition or any kind of diagnosis or psychopathology or anything of that nature. What is it based on? It's a mystery. It's not really clear. It's just she just loses the ability to speak. It's not based on trauma. You get the sense that there has been a certain amount of sort of being shuffled over or passed over in her life. But nothing major, nothing traumatic, nothing that would typically cause this kind of a psychological loss of speech. And the guy, it's not clear what his exact diagnosis is for his eye condition, and it might be to somebody who a doctor or someone who studies eyes or knows eye conditions, but it's not immediately clear what's wrong. But it is definitely a physical problem and a physical degeneration that is happening with him. So his does have a completely physical, physiological basis. And like I said, they somehow come together. Now he's teaching, he had learned Greek, obviously, earlier in his life, and so he is able to teach this course. She does not know Greek. Now, I don't know anything about Greek, but if this book is to be believed, Greek is a very difficult language. And there's an interesting point where it talks about how ancient Greek, because that's what they're studying, by the way, ancient Greek, not modern Greek. They're studying ancient Greek. I should have made that clear. They're studying ancient Greek, so the Greek of Homer, the Greek of Aristotle, and although not exactly related to the Greek of the Bible. Okay, so what is interesting about this ancient Greek is a very difficult language to learn. It has very specific words that mean different things, very specific tenses that mean different things, and there are examples given throughout the book of various phrases of just a very small change in the characters make a change in the meaning, and sometimes perhaps even a larger change than you would expect. And one of the things this book says is I think the professor is speaking at one point. He talks about this, or we're in his thoughts, and he's learning this. It's in his section because the book's divided into sections told sort of from his point of view, and sections told from her point of view. So I think that they are mostly one other, but not. I don't think they're precisely A B A B. I think there's some that go together with just him or just her for a couple of. But in any case, in one of his sections, it talks about how in the time of ancient Greek, that was the high point of language. Language was sophisticated, it was diversified, there were very, very, very fine distinctions made between things, so different kinds of love, different kinds of this, different kinds of that. There were all these different tenses and ways of saying things, and over time, language has become degraded. So now you have something like, say, modern Korean or modern English, which is a much poorer language from this perspective. It's lost some of the richness because there's only so many ways now to say things, and the fine precision isn't there. And I mean, I don't know anything about modern Korean. I don't know anything about old Korean. The only thing I know about Korean has a little bit to do with the construction of the alphabet, but I don't think that's what my little piece of knowledge is completely irrelevant to this novel. But I do think that this point about degradation of language is very, very interesting in terms of the language that we speak and the language that we see every day. How many words in English are considered to be a vital language? How many do you need to know to be considered fluent in English? Well, I read somewhere that it is roughly about 50,000. Now, that sounds like a lot, but when you start detailing all the little things that you know about, the different kinds of vehicles there are, how many different vehicles are there? There are vans, there are trucks, there are cars, there are minivans, there are SUVs, there are Jeeps, there are buggies, there are Mini Coopers, there are et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You realize that when you start detailing all of those, and then all the trees that you know, and all the animals that you know, and colors and different kinds of clothing, and then all the different kinds of ways that you can walk or move, amble, crawl, etc., across the board, all the different professions all the different kinds of ways in which people do things, the different kinds of job descriptions there are, the different kinds of locations there are, you realize that 50,000, although big, is not nearly as insurmountable or as crazy as it sounds. Now, if you're not a native speaker of English, 50,000 can sound crazy, because, I've been studying French in Duolingo for a while. In fact, I've completed the entire Duolingo course in French, and I'm doing some review of various things now. And the total number of unique words that it claims that I have learned is like 5,300 or 200 or something like that. So, let's round to 5,000. Okay, and of those 5,000, I can guarantee there are probably a good thousand that I don't really know the definition of very well. That if it comes up in a sentence, I might just not quite get it. Okay, those other 4,000, I know well. I can read them, I can type them, I can even on occasion speak them without any kinds of problems. Okay, but is 4,000, 5,000 words, is that a competent language? Is that a competent degree of knowledge in French? No. The same kind of like 50,000 is really what you want. So my sense of French is not nearly rich enough to allow me to consider myself to be bilingual or fluent in French. What I refer to this is just a, speaking out of my butt as much as anything, is I call what I know is a low level of fluency. I don't consider myself to be, able to carry on a completely sophisticated, fluent conversation with somebody. But if I were to encounter somebody who spoke only French, I think I'd be able to get across the majority of things that I might need to say. And if I got them to perhaps speak a little slower or perhaps dumb down some of the complexity of what they said, I think I could probably understand what they were saying well enough. So I don't think I'm completely incompetent, but I'm nowhere near completely fluent. But 50,000 words, Now, in ancient Greek, is that what it is, 50,000 words? That's a lot of Greek words. And when you have these fine gradations that you have to learn, and this is the thing. I mean, when you learn English, when you learn a language as a child, you learn up to 10 words a day. So, 350 some odd days in a year, let's say, you learn 10 words a day. You learn the equivalent of everything I know in French in 2 years. In 2 years, and you learn it in a way that allows you to manipulate and use it in a more fluid way than I can. Okay, and so this language is about this book. This book is about language and how this language is difficult for them. This communication is difficult, and I've got one more book by Han Kang to read, and I've got some thinking to do about what she's up to in these books. Because what she's doing has something to do with women and their inability to communicate what's really going on inside of them. And so there may be a sense of, the patriarchal nature of language, the way in which, women are the other to language and are in the core speaking outside, like what a Kristeva might say, or something like, from a Spivakian position, maybe women in Khan's imagination have some elements of the subaltern. And, and part of the problem here is they cannot speak without using language that's already been co-opted to, vitiate the meaning that they intend. And, this is, I think, part of what's being communicated here with this high point of Greek language coming down to the present, how language has declined, is the inability to speak anything meaningful. And although I think that her focus is on women, and I think that is both clear here and in The Vegetarian, that is her focus, I think that the men are also infected by the same thing. There are other men other than just the main Greek teacher in this book, and the other men have a certain kind of blandness or lack of depth or angularity to them, I guess. And I don't think that's because she wants them to be that way because she can't write them. I think they're that way because that is the world she's talking about, that there is a certain kind of nothingness. You know, and one of the things that this woman does, the main character, is she walks around because she can't sleep. So she walks around till she's exhausted. And it's like she's walking through a new and unknown city every day. Because Seoul is freaking huge. And so she just wanders off into the streets somewhere and winds up somewhere different from where she started. And maybe she circles around back home. Excuse me. Maybe she takes a bus, but that is what she does. And again, I think there's kind of a way in which, you know, the modern world is both degraded and in terms of its ability to express, but also the reality has gotten perhaps overwhelming as well. So I don't know, but there's something going on with language, and there's something going on with women, and something about women's place in the world. Like I said, something potentially, you know, related to feminism, something related to patriarchy, something related to women not being able to express. Because we must understand, in both of these books, in both The Vegetarian and in this book, the main female character does not communicate well with anyone else, and loses something of her ability to communicate or to relate socially to people around her, and also loses her marriage and loses her child. So there's something going on here with that. I don't know what, but there's something going on. And hopefully when I read the third book, there will be, maybe having seen the pattern 3 times, something will sort of come through in a way. But I like what I'm reading. I like what I see. Just as a read, I felt that this book was a little more tedious to read. It was a little drier, a little, there was less vitality to the language. There was less going on in any kind of impactful way. In fact, there's just no conflict at all, really, in this book to speak of. Yes, the coming together of these two people who are damaged and have a difficulty speaking is interesting, but there really isn't a conflict much going on there, not at least overtly. So, yeah, I like this book. Between the two of them, so far, I appreciate The Vegetarian better, but I think I'm understanding what she's doing better with this book. So, for what that's worth. Until next time.